All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Process 34 podcast. Tonight, we are joined by an old friend of mine, very, very good old friend of mine, Mr. Eric VanBuskirk. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And I just want to real quick, Eric, we were really close in, was it junior high and high school, or did it mainly start in high school?
Definitely middle school.
Okay, because I was remembering, I'm like, man, we used to go to the YMCA and play pickup basketball all the time, and we just clicked, and we were really close there for a while. And then obviously, just like a lot of people go their separate ways. You know, you get older, and we reconnected kind of through Process 34. You know, I noticed what you were doing with your life. I think you noticed what I was doing, and it was better than probably what you saw 10 years ago. And, you know, we reconnected. We went to the driving range and had a blast, and been wanting to get you on here for quite some time, and glad that we finally made it happen. So just a little brief background. Eric is you're a licensed social worker, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And you also do a lot of like just independent contractor work within schools and outside classes, stuff like that.
Yeah, right now I do mainly training. I do presentations for kind of like wellness outreach, and then I kind of juggle a few different things in terms of coaching and training for. Right now, like for example, I'm doing a grant. I'm working on a grant to train people with youth mental health first aid, which is that's a program that helps adults recognize how they can support mental health concerns in more of a prevention and supportive format. And then I'm also working with school mental health professionals statewide as a coach for some small groups that they're running for. It's like a 10-week program that they're running, and I'm a coach to any number. I don't know how many I'll have this semester.
What age level of school is that?
It varies. It's elementary through high school. So.
And then it's like you're with Genesee Intermediate School District, correct?
They're one of the contracts that I have.
Oh, okay.
But the one, I work kind of statewide. The last grant that I worked for, I was an outreach specialist for. My target population was educators and families across the state of Michigan, and then the coaching that I'm doing, it's kind of a random shuffle. Like I'll get my roster in a couple of weeks for I think I'm doing 7 cohorts. So I'll be meeting with 7 groups every week to coach, and they could have, there could be, from any county in the state, they could have a provider that's showing up for the coaching.
Okay. Nice.
I'm almost like 70% sure Coach Ken works at GISD.
Yeah, I actually asked him about this before. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you know Ken?
Yeah, I don't.
Nice.
I don't, but I'm not surprised. It's a big agency. I don't want to be. I think there's it's 1,600 or somewhere around between 1,600 and 2,000 employees across 20 some sites. There's lots of different sites. So he could be in like a day program, or he could be. The building that I worked out of was just kind of a home base, but every day I was in a different school providing services, and he could be doing something like that.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So, I also wanted to, I noticed I did a little research on you. I was creeping on your Facebook a little bit, but I noticed this, the Rediscover Wellness. What is that? Is that something separate or what?
Yeah, that's, I've been trying to get it up and running for a couple of years. It started, I kind of claimed the domain in 2020 during kind of the shutdown when I had a little bit more time. And it's really, it's my limited license practice. So it's an LLC, and at some point that's going to be, I mean, it is the business that I work under for my consulting work. But I have a web page that's under construction, and my hope is to kind of be able to condense all that I'm doing under the banner of this Rediscover Wellness work, um, as a way to, market myself, or just make it easier to access, information. Like I really want to be able to put out relevant content that's user friendly, that is like very up to date in terms of trends and needs that we're seeing in schools, and maybe that families are struggling with. And so I've got a few goals for Rediscover Wellness. So it's just hasn't I haven't had the time to figure out WordPress and get fancy with everything.
Yeah.
But I'm just kind of chipping away at it slowly.
Nice.
Where did you study at?
So my undergrad was at U of M Flint, and then I actually did my master's at Michigan State.
Oh, nice. Whereas
Yeah.
what was your major?
My master's is clinical social work.
Okay.
So it was a 2-year degree.
So you're only here for 2 years at MSU?
Yeah, and I actually commuted.
Oh, you did?
I took a year off between degrees because I just had no idea what I wanted to do. I graduated with like a super generalist bachelor's, and I think it was called like the Joint Program of Social Sciences. Like it was a fairly new major at the time, and it gave me the flexibility to figure out. I knew I wanted to do something with social sciences, whether it was like sociology or maybe go further into history and psychology. And then I ultimately decided on social work because I researched some of the programs, and Michigan State had a really nice program for me to commute to during the day. And I was working a second shift job at the time. So it really worked out nicely to study. And then I was working in a school, and it was nice to kind of be doing those two things at the same time.
Was this always kind of a field of work that you wanted to do from a younger age, or like what kind of attracted you to it?
Yeah, great question. I think when I was in elementary school, I wanted to be a marine biologist. And then in high school, I remember, as I was graduating, getting lots of, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I was pretty sure that I wanted to actually be a business major. And so, my furnace just kicked on. Is that bugging anybody?
I can't even hear it.
No.
Okay, good. Yeah, so my first year, I was a business major and hated it. Just didn't connect with it. Like I did the work because I had to, but it wasn't like something that I was getting like excited about and motivated by. So I switched to social work. And then after I graduated, I was a long-term sub for a year at a high school. And I actually found that I was enjoying the connecting with students, and kind of like, I had a lot of students that just were at risk, that were struggling. And I found myself gravitating more towards what's going on? How can we get through this? What do like worrying about that more than like, oh, I've got to teach these kids this curriculum. And so that was a really helpful year. And that's when I kind of decided like, I'm going to go full in on social work.
Nice. So like a social work setting, what kind of places have you, I know you kind of said it earlier, like you go to schools and stuff like that, but I know like when you're talking to a lot of people, sometimes you go to like prisons, hospitals, like all those kind of, so like what's some settings you've been in?
Yeah. That's one of the nice things about the degree that I have is it's, there's just endless opportunity and endless options to practice. So for me personally, I've done outpatient, where I have people that I meet with one-on-one, or maybe children and their parents. And we do what's called therapy, outpatient therapy. And we're working on things from anxiety to depression. With younger kids, a lot of times it's the behavioral concerns that, they might get diagnosed a certain way, but we're really just working on helping them out with skills that get them through, a school day or through an event in their life, maybe a big change. And then I've done community-based work as a kind of a case manager / therapist. And this is where I'm working with families. I'm going into their homes. I'm visiting the students or the kids at school, and I'm coordinating a lot of their services. So I'm working with maybe a psychiatrist. I'm working with their school social worker or their school counselor. I'm working with maybe another health provider, like for maybe like occupational therapy or physical therapy. And so that's called case management, where you're kind of managing the different aspects of a person's care. And so these home-based clinicians are generally working out of like a community practice, a community setting or agency, like in Genesee County, Community Mental Health. Now it's Genesee Health System, GHS. And so you're working there, but you're actually going into homes and going into schools. And then I've worked primarily in schools as a school-based clinician, where I've provided, I meet with students, pull them out of classes, and we have like really short-term goals that are usually school-related, like getting along with others, knowing how to act in certain settings, getting, maybe if they are struggling with things at home, then we might work on that. But sometimes that can be really hard because, when they're at school, you can only do so much, and then you don't want to send them back to class just completely wrecked for the day. So,
right. I was just going to say, how young are some of these kids?
They're as young as kindergarten. I've actually worked with a couple of, I guess they would be like pre-K or
wow,
early on. Yeah. And those are, it's totally dependent on what's presenting. And so when I say what's presenting, it's, what are the behaviors? What are the teachers seeing? How, what's the impact on maybe their school performance or their ability to relate with other people, whether it's in a safe way or, pro-social way. And so if they're appropriate, meaning if they can sit through a session, if they can, if I can connect with them on any level, then, we can try it. So age isn't really the determining factor. It's more the kind of where they're at developmentally. I've worked with kids all across the spectrum.
Is it more challenging for you with the age? Like, is it harder to really connect and get something out of a pre-K kid as opposed to a kid in high school?
I think it's, in my experience, it's kind of it's kind of like with parenting, where it's like every stage has its own challenges. And, so with younger kids, a lot of times it's not hard to make that connection. Like they're quick to latch on, especially if they're like starved of attention or, they want to be with you. And so the challenge there is really getting them to recognize, like, we're here for a reason. These are the things we want to try to work on. And with younger kids, you're often introducing play. It can be, playing with art, like playing with crayons and drawing pictures. And it could be playing little board games, cards. It could be playing with little action figures or, animals or superheroes. And you're introducing those kind of means as a way to then talk and get them to open up. And with teenagers, it's really about just being very, and in my experience, it's about being just transparent and not having all the answers. So a big difference is kids almost, in a lot of cases, they're ready to just kind of trust you because you're the adult. You're the person that is there to help them feel better and to make it better. And there are other situations where, they might have some abuse history, or there's other things that cause them to be really reluctant to connect. But more often than not, the kids that I've worked with are like, oh, hey, here's this fun guy. We're gonna hang out, and I get to get out of class. Or, my home life is pretty rough, but when I'm hanging out with this dude, we're having a pretty good time. With teenagers, it's like, okay, like I'm not here to tell you what I know about you, and so don't, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. I'm not, other than really being safe, and if there is a concern with like self-harm or risk behaviors, then I might be a little more assertive. But it's definitely more of a, you take the lead on you, because you're the expert on you. Even if every adult in your life is telling you that you're bad at this, or you're wrong, or you're this or you're that, you're still the expert on you. Maybe you just need not an expert, but you need somebody that's got more experience at life to kind of work with you. And I find that approach to be much more helpful. But yeah, from a challenge standpoint, it really is like there's a different kind of work that goes into every age and stage of development.
That makes sense.
So you gotta be pretty patient then.
Definitely. Yeah.
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 Especially with those
and
kids
I can
too.
I can go on record. I have 2 young kids. I have they're now 5 and 7, but early on in my career, like when I was right out of grad school, wasn't married, didn't have kids, I was like, throw whatever at me. I'll see kids as young as they can come in to 60 and above. And my supervisor at the time, said, this is great. Just, don't feel bad about limiting your availability and your preferred clientele criteria, so that you don't get burned out of certain populations, or certain, because there's also a lot of trends with like younger kids that are going into therapy. Overwhelmingly, it's for behavioral concerns. And it might be because of a diagnosis, but it's behavioral, that parents are like, we need help with this. And so all of that to say, I'm at a point right now where my 2 young kids give me a lot of, I get enough practice with them. And so I actually prefer working with, it's not to say I don't, I love working with kids. I mean, I just, I really like just being a big kid whenever I get the chance. And if I can get paid to do that for my job, then great. But I kind of like
a job at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of like, right now I'm kind of in the spot where I've really enjoyed working with other adults, and I'm doing I'm not doing as much clinical work right now. I'm more doing work around, how we can work smarter, how we can connect systems better around the child. And that's where I've kind of been, that's the space I've kind of been living in lately.
Real quick. So when you're in the schools and you're helping these children, are you, this is I guess a 2-part question here. First of all, are you dealing with only school related behavior and issues, or all around, like at home, everywhere? Are you taking it all in, or are you just focusing on only the complaints or reports or whatever's going on that you're receiving about the child at school?
Yeah, great question. So right now, if I'm doing any work in schools, I'm actually primarily working with the educators. But when I am working in schools with students, it's really, it's on school. There's lots of terminology, but it's basically called social skills. It falls under this umbrella of like problem solving, self-regulation, which means being able to control your body, being able to be safe and appropriate, knowing how to ask for things and share, like knowing how to cope with strong emotions, and use, whether it's like a breathing skill or some other way of getting the energy out in a safe and healthy way. And that's a lot of the focus is on supporting kids with that. And if they have concerns that are coming up in the home, the ideal scenario is to connect them with an outside provider that can have more flexibility in meeting with parents. And because ultimately with children, it's often a systems issue. And what I mean by that is they are, they're in a mix of things that are mostly out of their control. And so when you're trying to help children with things that are going on at home, in the school setting, it's like, we can teach you these skills that transfer to the home nicely, but they're probably not going to be reinforced at home.
Yeah.
But in the school, we can reinforce it. The teachers know what we're doing. We can give them copies of whatever handout we've given. We can let them know, hey, this is the skill we worked on. If you could reinforce this with your class, that'd be great. If you could praise them when they use it, even better. But when you want to address things at home, you usually have to reach out to the parents and connect them to an outside provider. There's been times when I've been able to have like occasional meetings with parents, but that's super rare, and it's usually not part of it's not usually part of like the job description for school-based providers to be going into the home and into the community.
Yeah. And that was, you kind of answered the second part. I was curious if I'm sure you run into cases where it's like, I can't do much more than this, but I can provide resource A, B, and C for your child or whatever it may be. Do you ever have to do that, or is it just, you're it?
Yeah. So that's actually that's kind of where I pivoted a little in my career, because I was doing a lot of that individual therapy with children, with families, and recognizing that there's just so much more to this. There's so many more layers, and there was a lot of kind of just, there'd be like a stop in terms of like getting them to a certain point, and then they needed more. They needed another layer of support. They needed maybe they needed help with transportation. They needed help with their utilities. And that was then kind of essentially it was limiting their ability to be successful with other things like go to work, go to school, keep their children in school. And so that's essentially, that was a big reason that I kind of went into more of a liaison role. And so what I would do in that role is my job was just to connect students and their families with what they needed. So if I worked for a school district in the Grand Rapids area, I worked for a couple of districts in the Grand Rapids area, where my job was really, it was just to touch base with all of the school social workers or the principals and kind of, just kind of know what was going on. And if a student had like a mental health concern, then I might connect them to the psychiatric hospital that was in the area. And then I would help them manage kind of the coordination of care process, which is really, you're here and you need to get there. What are the steps between here and there, whether it's getting back to school, whether it's getting to outpatient therapy to continue getting the support you need? Is it, getting to a psychologist when it's really hard sometimes to get into agencies? There's a long time. Usually, lately, it's just a long wait list. There's a shortage nationwide of providers. So just getting to know the system in terms of how to connect people to what they need became something that I really enjoyed. And it became something that I continue, it's essentially informing a lot of what I'm doing now around trying to help educators, have a tighter system of support for their students and for themselves, is knowing what's out there and knowing how to access it and knowing when you need to access it.
Yeah. And I know, that's one of the hardest parts is knowing what is available for people and what can you afford, what is state provided, what is, and so on and so forth. Are you providing like a treatment plan as well, or is that up to whoever you're sending them to?
It's typically who they're being sent to. I've done lots of treatment plans. When I'm doing direct work with students or with adults, I will have a treatment plan just to kind of monitor where we want to go and how we want to get there. But yeah, when you're referring out, they'll have some kind of a, and if it's their primary doctor, they have their developmental markers, and they kind of do things by age or by need. If it's if they're being recommended for like family case management, then they'll come up with goals specific to what that family needs, whether it's making sure that they regularly go to the doctor and they regularly interact with school. There's all kinds of ways that they can create goals that fit the need of that situation.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, 'cause as far as like seeking medication for mental health, only a psychiatrist can do that, right?
A psychiatrist is usually the preferred route. They're the highest trained, but you can also there are nurse practitioners that can provide. They have a subspecialty in psychiatry, and then any primary doctor, if they're comfortable, if they're an MD or a DO, if they're comfortable with it, they can prescribe. And so they'll typically, in my experience, like a family practice doctor is going to be okay with prescribing most like antidepressants, medicines for anxiety. They'll typically be okay with like ADHD. But when you get into maybe the more complicated cases of, manic depression or schizophrenia, and maybe some of the psychosis disorders, or if there's been a lot of substance abuse, they'll usually want to hand that off to somebody that's got a lot more training and background in the pharmacology of it.
That makes a lot more sense. I thought only mental health medicine was through a psychiatrist, so that does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, in a perfect world, I would love that, it would be somebody trained in psychiatry that has that training in knowing how things interact. But there's a shortage, and it's nationwide. And so you're seeing more and more nurse practitioners. So nurses that have gone back to school to get the training they need to then work underneath a supervising psychiatrist. So there's lots of clinics in the area. I work with one. I've connected with one of them a couple of times where there's one psychiatrist, but then I think there's 3 nurse practitioners that they meet with patients, they prescribe the medicine, but it all goes through, they get reviewed, all their charts get reviewed by this one psychiatrist.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Brady.
I know there's a huge shortage because my senior year last year, we had to do this senior exit job interview, career, whatever. And I wanted to be a psychiatrist or like go into psychology in general. And I kept searching all these psychologists, psychiatrists, and then in the area, nothing. I couldn't get in anywhere. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's and I don't really know how to speak to that. I don't want to say it's like a dying profession in any way. I think it's alive and well. It's just there's a lot of bureaucracy around. I can go on and on about our healthcare system, and it's really hard to be highly certified and highly trained in something because the demand is so high. And I think if you have the ability to just kind of have your pick, Michigan's not a destination. People want to go to California. They want to go to Florida. They want to go, Colorado. They want, so some states aren't struggling with it as much because it's just a nicer place to work.
I noticed too, like, there are obviously with where we are right now with technology and social media and YouTube and just everything that's at our fingertips. Are you like, do you see a lot of people, obviously outside of like trying to self-medicate, do you see a lot of people trying to help themselves with self-help routines, journaling, just all that? And, if that doesn't work, then seek out professional help. Does that play a role in that too? Or do you think it's more so just, there's a shortage because there's a shortage?
I think, it could be like a chicken and the egg thing. It's, for the longest time, mental health was stigmatized.
Yeah.
And so it still is to a certain degree, but I think we've come a long way, even in the last 5 to 10 years, in terms of, just accepting it and being more self-aware as a society that, okay, these things are really happening, and it's not, mental health it's physiological, it's in the brain, it's in our bodies. It's not just, mind over matter. It's not somebody that's just attention seeking, because even if it is attention seeking, often there's something going on there that's making somebody do these things, and it's not socially appropriate. So
yeah,
I think there's been more awareness around that, but I do think that that's been a big reason that people are more likely to say, hey, I'm going to try these things before I go public, or before I make the effort of really investing in a relationship with, this complete stranger. I think the other challenge is that because there's a shortage, people don't want to wait 3 weeks. They don't want to wait 3 months to get in with a therapist. And so they may be on a wait list, and they're just hopping around, different things that, from self-help to positive psychology. And, in a lot of cases, you need a good mix of more than just one or two things. And so having that clinical guidance with, whether it's journaling or meditation or yoga, or, having some groups that you're a part of, that's usually, going to be the best route. But the path of least resistance is usually like, oh, what's at my fingertips right now? And I think that's part of a, I'm not going to go into it, but there's just this like on demand, we, as a society, we have a very low tolerance for patience, and just kind of, let's wait for this thing that has lots of evidence, and there's proof that this process works, but I'm just going to do this thing right now because
it's just not fast enough, though.
Yeah.
And I
especially nowadays, you have technology at our fingertips like that. Everyone expects something like in an instant.
Yeah. And therapy is adjusted. There are lots of, like, when I started out doing, clinical therapy, it was like, you could not bill, so an insurance would not cover any kind of telephone, virtual screen therapy, text therapy. So in 12 years, we're at the point where you can get like legitimate therapy through text messaging, through, video conferencing, and, through phone calls. About psychiatry, a lot of medication checks are like 15-minute appointments on the telephone, where the psychiatrist will call you, or the nurse practitioner will call and just say, hey, how have you been this last month? And they'll run through the same questions they would ask you if you showed up in person. And then you're on your way.
Yeah.
Other than, for certain patients, that's not an option, like if there are some serious risk concerns. But, for most people, it's, telehealth and telemedicine are making it much more accessible. And so when you see people that are, if you see like a low number of access, it's often either it's like an insurance thing, like they just don't have the ability to pay for it, or it's kind of this, like, maybe they're uneasy about it, they're ambivalent, or they're a little resistant. Those are two of the more common, I think, issues in terms of not pursuing clinical help.
Yeah. So a couple things. So I know, like, as far as any sort of therapy, and this might be what a lot of people kind of resist the most, is you have to do a lot of work. You have to do a lot of work on yourself. You have to put in a lot of work. You have to be willing, and you have to be open. And those three things are terrifying to a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you might be getting somewhere with a patient, and then it's like you touch on something where it's like you might take 8 steps back, and they might, kind of shut down on you. So in my own personal experience, that was one of the hardest things about getting help and receiving help, was being willing and being open and being honest. Like, I can give you the surface. Here's my surface issues. And you're going to say, oh, great. But why? But why? And it's like, hey, why do you keep asking me this? I just told you why. And it's like, no, that's not really why. So, and some people can't see that. So I think with the, seeking out professional help, if you're at a point, where you feel like you need it, it probably is good, and it probably is right if you feel that way. But, like you were saying, it's something that, just like everything else, it's not going to work unless you're willing and unless you are honest with yourself about wanting to change or needing to change. And I'm sure there's some people who might be incapable of that. So how do you deal with those situations?
It's I would say it's that's probably one of the hardest parts of this profession is, when I have those, I've had those moments where just creating any kind of a relationship is like, that is, going 2, 3, 4, 5 sessions, and all they want to do is just make small talk.
Yeah.
Or anytime I try to, so tell me a little bit more about what happened here, and they kind of brush it off, or they change the subject. Or I've just had people tell me, like, no, I don't want to talk about that. I've worked with court mandated, patients. I've worked with older teens and young adults that are there at the kind of the requirement of their parent or their guardian. And it's, I'm just here so I can keep driving, or I'm just here so I can, have a place to live. And it's just, for me personally, I try to remind myself early and often, and this goes for, like, when I'm working in schools, and even when I'm working with my own kids, when I'm parenting, is everybody's doing the best they can with what they have. And whether we can recognize it or not, everybody's showing up with their best self that day. And your best self, it may look really bad, but that's just where you're at. And so my job is to continually meet people where they are. And so there's a lot of, call it empathy, compassion, patience. But it's it's a continual, for me personally, because I have experience navigating the system. I struggled with depression and anxiety, right around high school as I was getting into college. And I tried a few therapists, and I totally did the 1 or 2 sessions and then just no showed. And I was like, no, this isn't working. I don't like what they're trying to do here. So that ability to be vulnerable. I actually learned a term from a great speaker, great writer. Her name's Brene Brown. She's an incredible social worker. She does a lot of work on vulnerability and shame. And she has this term called vulner-brave. And it's kind of a mashup of what it takes to really confront the things in your life. And so, it's little things like that where I'm trying to remember, like, it's hard to be a human. It's hard, it's hard to be, X, Y, whoever I'm working with, knowing just even a little bit about their background. It's like, okay, there's a lot more to this, and I'm not the expert, so I just need to continue to be present. And so all that to say, um, it's really about just continuing to be that constant and to show up without judgment, to show up encouraging, and to really just sit with people and respect who they are and how they want to be. And at the end of the day, it's not my job to have the breakthrough. Like, I can only do what I can, and sometimes that's like the hardest advice to give yourself, is like, yeah, I might not be able to get through to this person, but I'm going to do my best to do what I can.
Yeah.
Would you say that's the hardest part of your job, is like breaking the ice?
In a lot of respects, yeah. I from a clinical standpoint, there's a lot of, again, there's that shame, there's that stigma, and so people, it's often people are coming into a complete stranger, and so being able to create that relationship, when I was doing my studies, I had a professor that said, therapy is 75% relational, and then it's like a quarter of clinical expertise. It's really about making that connection and then being able to create a safe space that is accountable, where you're protecting that space and you're giving them what they need in that moment. And we don't live in a society that does those things, right? So people come in and it's like, oh, what's this hippy dippy, what are they trying to sell me? Or yeah, I know this game. Like, you're gonna reel me in, and then you're gonna there's so there's that like, it's that ability to be vulnerable is really tough.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that across the board. I see it in when I'm working with with one-on-one therapy, or even like right now, a lot of my work in schools, teachers are really struggling to hear anything about wellness, because it's it's all watered down, and it's like they've heard this song and dance over and over, but yet they don't get what they need. And so I think that breakthrough of just making that connection is one of my like primary goals. Like, if I've not done anything during a training or during a session, I just want to let somebody know that, hey, I'm here for you. I value you being here. Those are like the priorities.
How do you feel about medication? Like, obviously there's cases where it's a must. You absolutely need to be medicated. But I feel as a society in whole, there is a lot of people on medication that might not need it. They might be, prescribed, and it's kind of, I look at it as like, it's the easy way out. I went and talked to a person for a couple weeks, and now I'm on Paxil now, you know what I mean? So on and so forth. And sometimes it's, they're misdiagnosed. They're not given the proper medication or whatever it may be, or maybe they just shouldn't be medicated. So in your eyes, like, do you think of that as like, obviously outside of the special cases, like, would that be a last resort for you?
I would say it's definitely case specific. I do agree. I think as a society, we are over medicated. And I think that's just across the board, because we're not a prevention oriented society. So whether it's like heart disease or it's depression, the going to the pill it's the easy thing to do. It's the quick thing to do. And for a lot of people, because again, the society that we live in, and because of the way we've been raised and the messages that we've been raised with, it's the most sustainable way, which is unfortunate. because, you know, when we're looking at recovery, when we're looking at, you know, what is health, it's very multidimensional. It's very, you know, there's all these different components of a whole person. And so ideally, you know, holistic medicine would be the kind of the main driver, but we just don't have the resources for that. And so my thoughts on medication are, it's kind of this necessary evil until we have the infrastructure where, you know, like if insurance companies, they don't pay for holistic providers. Like you can't bill insurance. You can use HSA funds, you know, but you can't bill an insurance company because there's no code for holistic XYZ. You can't bill insurances for personal trainers, you know. So there's all these things that, you know, for most Americans, they may be open to it, but they don't have access to it. So the best they're going to get is medicine because they don't have the resources to maybe have the diet they need because the limited income they have doesn't let them, you know, be selective about having fresh food or, you know, avoiding certain processed foods. So with mental health, I think it's the same thing where we have a lot of, you know, so somebody's anxiety or depression, it actually could be rooted in a lot of other things that would be best treated through maybe like a balanced diet and a managed exercise plan and, you know, maybe meditation and maybe meeting with a psychotherapist. But there's a lot of pieces to that, and we're just not, I don't think we're there yet. So the way that I try to be optimistic, and I think my approach when I'm talking with people is combining the skill with the pill. And that's just a fancy way of saying, if you're going to have medicine, studies have shown that it is most effective when you combine it with some kind of skill-based, whether it's therapy, whether you're working with, you know, a mindfulness provider, you know, you're doing something to mitigate the symptoms that you're having. And then the medicine is allowing you to, it's like a crutch basically.
Yeah.
And then it's more of a short-term intervention, and short-term can be a couple of years even, but the idea is that it's not a forever sentence of, I'm just going to keep taking these pills because I can't fix this. I can't overcome this. We don't quite have the, you know, it's a very privileged thing to be able to do a lot of the things that we need to do to have like a holistic approach to health. And we just don't have that right now.
I'm glad that you said that though, because that's kind of how I look at it too, is like, you know, there's people who do it the right way and they're on medicine, but like getting, you know, taking that pill in the morning doesn't mean, okay, you're good now, you're cured, you know, you don't have to worry about anything else, just go about living your life. Like you still got to do, whether you're seeking out professional help, you're going to group sessions, whatever it may be, you still have to do work on yourself. Like you still have to put in the groundwork, no matter what. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise it's just, you're just taking medicine for a placebo effect almost, you know, so.
Literally.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. In a lot of cases, we build up a tolerance. So you can't, you know, you're going to max out and then you're going to have to cycle to a different medication, which actually can put people back. They have to, you know, it's not a very, you know, that's where psychiatry is a very inexact science. It's not like, oh, you need a knee replacement. This is what we do. It's the same process for just about everybody. You know, it's, you know, oh, you don't need this many milligrams of this blood thinner. It's, you know, so it's a very gray area. And yeah, I would love to see, you know, less and less and less, and maybe we'll get there. I think we're, in some aspects of our life, our society, we are trending in a good direction, but there's a long way to go to get us away from relying on medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you also, so obviously we kind of touched base on like why you got into this, and it kind of seemed like, I guess, did your own struggles, your own experience with mental health issues growing up, did that play any factor in what you're doing now? Or also, is it helping you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my experience was I lived with anxiety. If you can remember me from middle school, high school, I was a pretty high performing, like, I was a high performing person. I was really good at, I got good grades. I was active in sports. I had a fair amount of friends. Like, I wasn't, if any teacher, was like, there was nothing really jumping out. And, but there were still, like, when I look back, there were still some situations where I was like, somebody probably could have said something there and maybe given me a different direction. So, I think awareness has gone a long way, and I'm really thankful that we're in a much better place with that. But that's a big part of the work that I strive to do, especially with schools, because I think that in some cases, in many cases, schools are the safest and most supportive place that kids are ever at. Like, they go to school and they have real connection with teachers and adults that care about them and that are trying to help them. They get fed meals. They, in a lot of cases, are getting their dental and their health screenings. They're being taught social skills and ways to interact. They're being taught employability skills. And for a lot of kids, like, they're not getting any of that at home. And they might, they might have broken families. They might have parents that are, just struggling to make ends meet. And so they're not able to recognize these things. And so I think schools, we want to connect schools, these, we already do so much in schools. It's hard. You can't deny the fact that kids are coming to school with these problems. They're carrying baggage with them, and they're showing up every day. And so what I want to see is us to just continue to do better as a society, to really take care of the whole child. That's actually a phrase for educators, is you want to develop the whole child. You want to educate the whole child. Meaning, you want to make sure that they're getting not just academic knowledge, but we're training them in their social skills. We're training them in, how they're going to be civilians and productive citizens, how they're going to be safe and responsible. And, from kindergarten, it's social skills, to high school, it's like, this is what you're going to do when you get into the real world. And this is how you be an adult. So we already do a lot of that stuff. And I think it's almost kind of like a waste. It's a missed opportunity. I shouldn't say a waste. It's a missed opportunity to not just like complete that and provide more of that support, because teachers are doing this already. Their teachers are wearing so many hats during the day. Principals are not just principals. Most schools don't have a licensed social worker. They don't have the luxury of a counselor or social worker that can just continue to check in with students. And so I think that, it'd be really nice if we had that, because I do think that we know what's wrong. We know when things are not going well. And I think teachers are very aware of, like, this kid is struggling. And my wife is a teacher, and I hear lots of different stories about, this kid, that kid, oh man, there's more going on there. But they can't do anything about it other than just continue to, like, provide that safe classroom and try to check in with parents. But we need just one more layer of consistent, educated, knowledgeable support to really create that, like, connected web of support for students. And that's from my experience, but also from what I witnessed growing up. I had, we've had lots of classmates where it's like, okay, like, something different could have really helped them. And the way that school was working was not working for them. And sometimes it was just because they needed a need met and it wasn't being met. So they went elsewhere to find that need, to meet that need.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Would you argue that school can sometimes be the most traumatic thing for a kid, though?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, there's, schools are, there's a whole nother side to it. I mean, we have the most school shootings, like it's by far, compared to, any other first world country. Social anxiety is at an all-time high, especially when coming back from the closures and the school pauses of COVID. That amplified people getting used
Social
to
media.
like, oh, I don't have to be around big crowds all the time. And then, yeah, social media, it's creating all kinds of self-esteem issues. And, it's like everything follows people. So for sure, it's like if something happens, it can be very traumatizing. And then to be forced to go back to school and face it over and over, to relive it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you ever deal with athletes?
Not as much. I mean, I've definitely I've worked with quite a few student athletes. Yeah.
I was just curious because, obviously my background and what Brady's doing now, we were sharing not too long ago, like there's also like there's things that people rely on, I think, that are healthy. They are very healthy. And when you look back on it, like I was looking back on my life, and it's like sports got me through a lot. Like sports was therapy for me. Not just playing, but meeting people, socializing, developing social skills, just all sorts of things, right? Then
Definitely.
I was hurt and I couldn't play anymore, and that led from, it led me down this slippery slope. But looking back, it was like the hardest thing for me to accept and the hardest thing for me to go through was A, I can't play sports anymore, and B, what am I supposed to do now? How do I cope
Yeah.
with life? Because I have no coping skills whatsoever outside of pick up a ball. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, that was my whole childhood. That was a lot of your childhood. It was, we played outside, we played sports, we played organized sports, and it carried on through school. And I think it helped a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, so I mentioned, multidimensional wellness, and I actually am very partial to an 8-dimensional model that was created by SAMHSA. It's research based. It's SAMHSA is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So they do a lot of work around recovery and treating, mental health and substance abuse disorders. So a lot of the stuff they come out with, it's pretty vetted, it's legit. And so this contextual framework that it breaks down into these 8 dimensions, and one of the dimensions is the social dimension. And so a part of us is social, and what it looks like is different for everybody, but we have this need to be a part of something, to be connected to something that's bigger than us. And that kind of bleeds over into like a spiritual dimension. The 8 dimensions actually kind of, it's like these overlapping circles that kind of complete, not just like pie slices.
Yeah.
But, so that idea is that sometimes and I think this is true for a lot of athletes, but it's also true for like anybody that's really good at something, is you invest so much of yourself into it that you've got this disproportionate section where you've got all these other capabilities, you just haven't like nurtured them, you haven't developed them. And so if you were if you were really into a certain sport and you get injured, or maybe you get cut from a team, that was my experience. It was often like, oh, I didn't make the team, what am I going to do? Or I'm not good enough to do this, what am I going to do instead? Is really just trying to figure out, ideally you're kind of balanced already, but that's not the case for most people. Like that's just not the norm. We kind of stumble through life figuring that out. But the earlier the better of, recognizing that, I have the ability to be really good at lots of different things, and my identity doesn't have to be completely absorbed into this one thing.
Yeah.
The connections that I make can be in these other areas. And so having kind of a multi-dimensional identity, to kind of feed your self-esteem and your worth, it's, I would say it's definitely something that you have to grow into.
Yeah.
Very rare for younger people to just have that right out of the gate, because it takes a lot of work. You have to recognize self-awareness. You really got to learn things about yourself, and that was my experience. I mean, that's ultimately, I think, when we graduated, I was a part of like everything, man. I was in student council. I played soccer. I was, doing this club, doing that. I was in chorale. Like, I was like, I was connected to so many different things. And then when I got to college, it was like, shoot, man, I don't have anything I'm connected to anymore. And most of my friends are away at college. So, I'd go visit them on the weekends, and, I'd try to work, but I definitely had to kind of rediscover myself. And that took a while.
Yeah.
I think you really just defined what we're doing with Process 34 right now, because we're trying to advocate the student athletes that your athletic life is so short, and there's so much more to life than just that sport. Like, you are so much more than the sport, and that's just what we're trying to get out to the people. So once they're done with their sport, their mental health's just there.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, and I think also, just imagine if you had that mindset like at a younger age and while you were participating in sports. Like, that's next level. Like, that is like, I look back and it's like, wow, you know what I mean? Like, there are so many instances in my life where it's just like looking back, like, how stupid, like it was right there in front of my face, or why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? And it's just like, you're blinded. You have a one-track mind, and
Absolutely.
that was my one-track mind,
Yeah, it's definitely, it's very, I would say it's like that is like the trajectory that most people kind of grow up with. And, I think the impetus is actually on the adults that are, surrounding that person, to just constantly remind them, you are more than this. You are, and it's this, there's a concept called growth mindset. You may have heard that term before, but it's about our brains have this ability to continue growing, and the way that we perceive our challenges is going to really define how we handle them. And so if we run into a roadblock and it's like, man, I can't get through this, there's no way around it, then that's going to be the mindset. It's just like, oh, I'm not an athlete anymore. What am I going to be? And then you're just waiting for somebody or something to push you in a different direction, or you're waiting, you're not being the aggressor of your life. And so, with this growth mindset, it's like, oh, I haven't figured it out yet. I've got to keep working at it. And it's not, we don't live in a society that cultivates a growth mindset, because it is, it's like I want it now. And a lot of children don't grow up with parents that are articulate, in that kind of thinking. And so we have a lot of athletes that grow up with parents that are like, hey, great job scoring that goal today, versus like, man, I really like that you just gave it all you had today. There's different ways that we can, like, and I'm guilty of that. Like, I'm trying to incorporate that philosophy into my parenting. But old habits are hard to break. So it's like, even when I'm coaching my own son's team and he scores, I'm like, yes. And then I'm like, and then I got to remember, like, hey, D, great job, man. That goal didn't happen without this defense stopping, and just trying to teach, that kind of a different way of thinking to student athletes from a younger age. And then it becomes much more of a, there's less pressure, and there's more of an ability to really thrive, because you're really just connected to a bigger, like, there's more of a team mentality.
Yeah.
And there's much less of a, like, failure mentality, because it's like, okay, maybe I'm just not meant to do this. I'm not good enough. Just because I didn't succeed to the point I wanted to here doesn't mean anything about the rest of me. Like, all it means is I gave it my best, and now I'm going to try to do my best at something else.
Yeah, and that's so cool that you do that, though, because I think too, like you were saying, as far as the team aspect, it also, like, you're teaching these kids that, it's not all about them. They're gonna get, all the accolades, they're gonna get all the attention, the star athletes, they always do, right?
Right.
But in all team sports, you put that one person out, like in basketball, for instance, you put that one person out there and just have them play against the 5 on the other team, what's going to happen, right? So you're teaching, like, it's not all about you. It's not all about him. It's not all about her. It's about us. And your success wouldn't have happened without the team success, working together. And it's just, it sounds like you're trying to build more of a culture rather than, a winning record.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I, I reflect a lot. I played a lot of soccer growing up, and on the surface, I was, varsity soccer, great, but I never felt good enough. I never felt, like I was where I wanted to be, and I just had these unrealistic expectations. Like, I just, like, if you ask anybody, it was like, yeah, dude, you're playing varsity soccer. Like, what's like, well, yeah, but I'm not like all district. I'm not all whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not getting these
never
scholarship offers, and like, it was just, and at some point, I could not reconcile that, and really had a hard time with that. And I've worked through it since, but I think at a younger age, it was like, yeah, that's who I am. And
we actually had a mental mindset meeting this past Tuesday, and one of the things was we were just talking, like, man, we get in our head so much, like we're these terrible wrestlers, we're not doing things correctly. But then the guy was like, you have to remember, you're wrestling in the best wrestling conference in the whole country. Like, why don't you just take a step back and appreciate that, and appreciate where you're at, rather than all the other things that are going on. Just be more appreciative,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's definitely a balance between striving for excellence and really enjoying what you're, like, being in the moment of what you're doing. And I think that's, it's just so rare. And I think especially at the high school level, where we're still developing our identities, and we're still, kind of figuring out things around self-esteem. It's so hard to have more of that expanded view that, like, man, I'm playing this game that I used to just want to play for fun. Like, why am I so wrapped up in how many goals I'm going to score, or being the full-time starter at this position? Like, I should just get to enjoy the fact that, like, I can play this game, and that I get to play it with friends, and that, so yeah, there's definitely, like, so much more to think about. And then in doing that, you actually increase your odds for success, because you're taking away that stress, you're taking away the distraction.
It's freeing,
and it's really like, when you can really be fully present in what you're doing, that's when you're in that, you're in that zone.
Yes, sir. Let me just say real quick, before Eric talks more about his soccer career, this guy was a problem on the boards. You put him, we go down the YMCA, and you put Eric down low. Like, this guy was pre-Ben Wallace, okay? Like, he was a problem down low.
I had the lanky arms that would never quit.
Yeah, and you were a tough son of a bitch, man. You never gave in, like, no matter who was on you. Like, Eric was good for, Eric was he was like a 15 point, 10 rebound kind of guy every time we went up there. So definitely was always on the squad.
Yeah, I miss those days. I can't do it anymore.
Wasn't that awesome, man?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I played, I got roped into a pickup basketball game. Oh my God. And, like, I'm sure, you probably watch the NBA, but basketball is completely different now than when we played. It is Nobody goes inside of the 3-point line. Nobody.
I know. I noticed that. Yeah.
Nobody.
I've noticed
I mean,
that.
it is insane. So like I was just shooting around up at Genesis and this kid comes up and he's like, "Hey man, you want to run?" I looked over. I'm like, I could probably hang. Yeah, let's go. And like I'm like posting up. Like I got a kid on me that's like 5'6". I'm posting up.
Yeah.
Nobody would pass me the ball. Nobody would pass me the ball. This kid's shooting like logo 3-pointers with 3 guys on them, over the backboard, 10 feet short. I'm like, what are we doing out here? And then you go back on defense and it's like, it doesn't exist. There's no defense and there's no, like, it was a different game. So needless to say, after I realized that after like 3 possessions, I just cherry picked. I just stayed down there. I'm like, I'm not going to run back and forth for you guys just to fling up a 3-pointer for me to go back, like I'm not doing that. So funny, man. Thankful that I can play though. Thankful that I can still play, but definitely can't do the full court. Full court is completely out of the question now. It's straight half court, 3-on-3, max. So
yeah.
It's fun times though. Fun times. Brady, you got anything?
I don't. I mean, Eric, you covered everything. You said some great things, man.
I want to ask you one thing real quick.
You guys ask great questions.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
So, with my own past experiences, this was by far the hardest thing for me to do, and I'm sure all sorts of people suffer from the same problem. What advice do you have for somebody who might think they're suffering from some mental health issues, or they know they are, but they're afraid to ask for help?
Yeah. I think my biggest advice is you don't have to do it alone. Like we live in a society that values, the pull yourself up by your bootstraps and, views mental, it views any kind of a quote unquote weakness as a weakness, as something inherently like wrong or this flaw. But mental health is not yes, there's a biological and yes, there's a genetic component to it. But on the whole, mental health is a symptom of our society. And so I think that if people can recognize that, like, it's not about me. It's about like, there's a collective we going on, from the family I was born into, to the community I live in, to all of the different things that have affected me, from, trauma to, different changes in my life, and recognizing that you're kind of a part of this bigger picture. Maybe it frames it in a different way, so that it's like, wow, I'm not the problem. There's not something wrong with me. Like, I'm just struggling with something.
Yeah.
And, and when you get to that point, I would say, one of the easiest things to do is call the 988 helpline, or the lifeline. It's called the 988. It used to be it's the retitled suicide hotline. They changed it to 988. And, there's 24/7 trained counselors on hand that will answer any question. And it's, you don't have to provide information. It's totally anonymous, as you want it to be. But they'll also, I call it, they'll kind of hold your hand through, like, okay, if I wanted to get help, where would I go? Who could I contact? If I needed help, what do I do? Like, I don't have insurance. What do I do? So it's not just a line to call if you're in a crisis, but it's a line, it's a resource where it's very, like, hands off. It's a very safe space to explore how to get help and what it might look like. So, that, I guess that's, some of the advice that I might give somebody that, maybe doesn't know how to reach out, or is uncomfortable, putting themselves out there. Even if it's just calling an agency, you might still have to give your name and number, and, might be worried about, like, oh, I don't want to give you my contact info. calling the 988 helpline can go a long way.
That's cool. And I never, maybe it's silly, but I honestly didn't know that you could call that number for just any sort of guidance. I always kind of viewed it as like a last case scenario. I better get someone on the horn kind of thing. So thank you for providing that. That's very, very helpful.
Yeah, extremely.
Yeah. It's come a long way, because it used to just be a crisis line, but they've made a lot of changes over the, especially in the last like 5 years, to make it more of a comprehensive support.
Yeah, as they should. That's awesome.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I think, I don't know the statistics, but I would say, it's got to be pretty high up there. Probably like at least one person in every household has or is experiencing some sort of mental health issue. And I guess I just want to say, like, just ask for help, whether it be a professional, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a friend, whether it's a family member, anything. The first step, in my opinion, is just talk about it. Just be open for just once and see what happens. Maybe even just talking to a person might help you. It might take care of, the majority of it. Just getting that off of your chest, off of your mind, whether it be guilt, shame, confusion, whatever, so
definitely.
Yeah, and that's cool that there's people willing to sit around and talk and wait for those phone calls and provide help for people, because it's hard, man. It's hard. Life is hard. Yeah. And it doesn't really get any easier. It's just, how do you navigate it, and what are you doing
Absolutely.
to navigate it? So Eric, I cannot thank you enough, dude. I'm so happy we reconnected. I hope that we can hang soon. Definitely going to go golfing this summer. We did hit the driving range. That was nice, but we need to see you on the course. I need to see you on the course. For sure, man.
That'll be a good time for anybody watching.
Oh, yeah, we're going to record it. No, thank you so much, man. And thank you for everything you do. Seriously, I mean that. I owe a lot of gratitude to people like yourself, and who knows where I would be without it. So thank you for everything you do, and I hope you continue. And I just have a feeling, just because of who you are, how you present yourself, I see like a book or something in the future, but there's definitely something like you're the man, dude. So thank you so much. Loved having you on here, and like I said, hopefully we can continue on and work together, hang out, whatever, get Brady involved. Surprisingly enough, for a wrestler, this kid has a great golf swing. So
all right. No, it'd be great to hang out with you guys.
It's not too shabby.
Yeah.
No, you guys are great. I appreciate what you're doing, and I think that you're normalizing the stigma, decreasing the stigma. You're validating the fact that, you said statistics pre-COVID, 1 in 5 Americans could be diagnosed, according to statistics pre-COVID. And that, so we don't have quite the numbers that, we don't have CDC reporting and household reporting, but that's high. So my anticipation is that it's going to be closer to 1 in 4. So I think you're right. It is basically every household. You're nailing it. And so in one way it's concerning, but in another way, I try to reframe it again as like, this isn't unusual. Like, it's normal. Like, it's okay to not be okay sometimes.
Yeah. So 100%, because not many people are okay.
That. Yeah. So I appreciate any kind of work where we're advocating just to increase that awareness and to create more of a dialogue around just being human. Like, we're doing the best we can.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, man. And just real quick, I will put some links for Eric when we drop the podcast. But, if there are people out there that that are listening, that are in the education system, that are interested in, one of your classes, your sessions, whatever, I will provide your social media handles if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone can reach out, or just, if you're having a hard time and you want professional guidance, obviously he's not required to respond to you, but I'm sure Eric is the kind of person who would, if he is able to and has the time to, would be able to help you or send you off in the right direction. So
yeah, I'm always happy to do what I can when I can.
Absolutely. We all appreciate that. And for the rest of you, if you have not yet subscribed to our podcast, we are on YouTube, we are on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're all over social media. We got TikTok, we got Facebook, and we have Instagram. I will also provide the links on those. This will be dropping Friday. Gosh, what is the date? Next Friday. I'm sorry, this is bad. The 26th, Friday the 26th. This will be available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And please, like I said, subscribe if you have not yet done so. Share, like, comment, tell all your friends, your family. We're just trying to help as many people as we can in whatever way we can, because we all know how hard life is. And we all, I think, if we just kind of learn how to help each other, show a little compassion, show a little kindness, you'd be surprised at the outcome. So
gonna be a better world
to everyone. Absolutely. Could not agree more. So without further ado, Eric, appreciate you, dude. Brady, go kick some ass. See you guys soon.